Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today I'm going to be talking about God, or rather the human conception of God, the solar system, archetypal narratives of the human subconscious, and how we can take back that narrative to have more power for ourselves. So I just recently, the other day, celebrated my 28th birthday. 28, I guess, is a special birthday. See, there's different cycles in the solar system. There's our regular, day and night, our 24-hour cycle. There's the Earth year of 365 days. But there's also all these other moving parts in the solar system. We tend to discount the importance of those cycles. Basically it gets relegated to mysticism, astrology, But the planets very physically have something to do with how time and because time itself is just a relative measure of movement, right? And everything moves in cycles, okay? So this is the thing, is that what is God? People, like many words, God is a word that many people use under the assumption that they know what it means. And then, people go on to speak authoritatively, saying God definitively does exist, or God definitively does not exist. Because we all know what the word means, right? Obviously, we all know what the word means if we're all debating endlessly about this or that regarding God, right? So people, they start off on an assumption, a false assumption in most cases, and it splits the mind into arguing against itself, two incomplete positions arguing against each other. And, this is the Hegelian dialectic, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Two incomplete narratives create a narrative by which a change can be achieved. Just like, all the men and women are merely players and all this is just a world stage. Basically, the theater, the aspect of theater and human relations portrayed through theater is far more central to human thinking than we really realize. We like to pretend like we're rational creatures and, we really think out all the different options and we choose the best option, but we're really, creatures of habit. We operate almost entirely on subconscious incentives, basically, and things that we don't really perceive pretty much command most of our action, and at most we have a little bit of rationality and a little bit of free will in the face of all that momentum of all the things that have happened, and basically just tradition and just, well, that's the way it's always been, This 28-year cycle of Saturn has me thinking a lot lately. I hear people talk about Saturn sometimes, and Saturn supposedly this bad influence, and they get word that the Illuminati are worshiping Saturn, and basically there's a hexagon at the North Pole of Saturn, and the hexagon is the cube, and the cube is the Star of David, and the Star of David is Israel, and it's like we all gotta fight against Saturn because Saturn is evil. Again, this is the entire nature that a planet could be evil. Really brings us back to the fact that when people are operating from false assumptions, they will have pointless debates, completely inane discussions of no merit or content whatsoever, because neither side or neither arguer considered the actual definition of the terms, the value of the identities in mathematical speak. So I guess to break it down, the God of the Bible, okay, El, is not the creator of the universe. All right, not even in the literal story of the Bible is that supposed to be the case. If you check the definition of the identities involved, El is not the creator of the universe. The creator of the universe, first of all, could not speak from within his or her own universe. El is Saturn, okay? El is the Greek, or Hebrew name for the God, all right? And Israel, basically El is one of the three kind of names for, divinity. There's lots of names for God, right? There's lots and lots of names for that spirit, or that energy. But again, people kind of conflate one with the other, but they actually have specific values and meanings. and L is God, is Saturn. Okay, so people, the meaning of the ancient word for God is Saturn. Okay, that's kind of strange. People, what, they were worshiping Saturn? Why would they worship Saturn? You know, what's really interesting is we look back to the ancient accounts, and not just Greek and Roman, but Chinese and Aztec and Maya, and all over the world, African. Basically all the cultures of the world all have this obsession with the planets, and they speak of the planets as the gods, right? It's this whole dramatic narrative involving these archetypal identities, which basically correlate to the planets. And what's interesting is all the cultures around the world report similar developments in this kind of divine drama, this heavenly drama. Basically, there's a war in the heavens, a war among the gods, and basically there's a cataclysm, and basically the people of the world were documenting all these different changes and cataclysms, and they were recording it in all the ways that they knew how with the technology at the time. And it's funny because now today we see these petroglyphs and we see this ancient artwork, and we're like, oh, isn't this cute? All these people, and they're playing with their crayons and they're drawing little pictures, and oh, look at these little spirals and these funny figures. Oh, aren't they adorable? Pretending that our ancestors are just these idiotic children, basically just like doodling for their own amusement. Maybe that's a projection from our own time. But basically we pretend like our ancestors are idiots, but we neglect to realize that our ancestors are us. Okay, the people thousands of years ago, they are genetically identical to who we are today. Yes, there's been a little bit of evolution in that time, a lot of social evolution and intellectual evolution, but genetically, I mean, we're still the same humans, and socially, we still live relatively similar lives with the whole family structure and the basis of human societies, and all that hasn't changed that much in 10,000 years. But what's interesting is somewhere about the 10,000-11,000 year mark, all of the cultures around the world report this era of cataclysm, basically the destruction of the old world, basically, and this huge transition, out of which came, basically the world that we're in today, and the people's, they all documented their own story coming out of that cataclysm. And a lot of the ancient philosophers, they say that there used to be a single common human civilization, Atlantis, or what have you. And it's really interesting, and it's hard for me to discount, and I think it should be hard for people to discount the validity of these observations, because without fail, every single culture around the world assigns the same planet to the same day of the week, right? A 7-day week, and every single culture around the world consistently assigns, basically the same planets to the same day of the week, and even in English, basically, Moon Day, Monday, Deus Day, Tuesday, Woden's Day, Odin's Day, Wednesday, Thor's Day, Thursday, Odin, Thor. Basically, these are the Norse, assignations of the planetary identities, the gods, right? And so people, they take things personally, right? We received the narratives from our ancestors about these cosmic dramas, and this benevolent god Saturn, who provided everything for the human species, and then for whatever reason turned on the human species and became, basically the one who eats his own children, and became a vengeful god who, laid waste to the planet and, basically cast judgment on his children. So when we take the stories of the Bible literally, and we're asking ourselves, why would this supposed creator of the universe, this all-benevolent creature, lay waste to his own children and consume his own children and judge them almost on a whim, and this caused a trauma in the mind of the collective human psyche, right? Like, imagine your whole civilization being destroyed, like everything you've known basically all of a sudden falls apart. And that is what it looks like happened a long time ago, is that basically the world was destroyed by some sort of planetary transition, the climate shifted. All of a sudden, food couldn't be grown where it was grown for thousands of years, and people basically had to make do, and they had to realize that their previous culture had been shattered, and they had to carry on with whatever fragments of memory that they had left. And that is why we have these common elements today when we ontologically examine the structure of religious beliefs. And again, things were not always the same. Okay, we pretend like we live in this relatively peaceful climate. There have been some ups and downs over the last several hundred years, but mainly it's been a very peaceful climate. And the thing is, we've had the bias of having a very peaceful, calm era of human climate, and basically now the climate's shifting a little bit, and we're like, oh my god, it must be our fault, and humans are capable of influencing their environment for sure, but we're coming out of our period of relative calm, and now we're freaking out, but we're actually biased. The world hasn't always been as calm as it is now, and the sky may not have always looked the way that it did. I just got done rewatching a documentary that you can find on YouTube called Symbols of an Alien Sky. It's over at a channel called Thunderbolts Project. And basically, these guys basically go in and they analyze all the rock art, all the pictographs, and all the ancient cultures' narratives, and basically make the thesis that the planets of the solar system used to be in an entirely different configuration. And they loomed much larger in the sky. They were much closer to Earth. And furthermore, that they were actually all in alignment. But basically, whereas now we have the sun at the center and all the planets spinning around, that it may have been that the sun was basically moving throughout the galaxy and the planets were straight in tow, basically all in a line. And so, from the Earth's perspective, at the North Pole was Saturn fixed in the sky, basically this great kind of object, and that the other planets, Mars and Venus, were also like in line. In this narrative, basically certain planets that are part of the solar system now were not always part of the solar system. And so, Kronos is another name for Saturn, the Greek name for Saturn. And what do we have in the Greek pantheon? We have the overthrow of Cronus, right? Cronus is Saturn. The overthrow of Cronus by whom? Zeus, right? The Olympians. Zeus overthrows Cronus, and Zeus, basically creates this war in the heavens, to overthrow, the previous ruler of the gods. And who is Zeus? This is Jupiter, right? So in this narrative, basically, that this Jupiter was not always a part of the solar system and actually came into the solar system and sent all of the planets out of their existing peaceful, lockstep alignment, and basically eventually there was this war of the gods, and there was this series of electrical discharge events, lightning bolts firing between the planets in this environment of highly charged electrical plasma between the planets. And our ancestors, thousands of years ago, experienced these huge planetary storms and climate catastrophes, and they recorded it. Again, they recorded it in just artwork and images. And again, this is across the entire world. It's one thing to ignore when it's just like one little thing here and there, but you look at the full spectrum of ancient human artwork, and they're all trying to tell you the same thing. That basically they were trying to tell you what they saw in the sky. All right, and now we live in a culture that twists and re-evaluates and basically reinterprets all of these ancient symbols and pretends like they're all this form of daytime television for our ancient ancestors, that they just made up all these stories for their own amusement. Like, why would they know, though? If people were going to try and record something so that it would last thousands of years, it probably was a very important message, and it was trying to record something that happened, and they was a very integral part of their existence. Now basically Saturn is what? It's a planet sitting out in the far reaches of the solar system, but it moves in a 28 to 30 year cycle, and astrologically, basically Saturn is still known as the timekeeper, right? Saturn, father time. And, basically, so Saturn moves in its orbit of 28 to 30 years, punctuated by 4 arcs of 7 years apiece. And so, basically, let's say that Saturn is God, right? And so 1 year of Saturn around the sun is a God year, right? It's 1 year in God's time. So, for a human being to reach the age of 28, 29, 30, basically it's like you're completing your first God year, to use that terminology, which I've just kind of developed on the fly. What's interesting is reading about the return of Saturn, as it's known, basically this period of transition that a human being experiences around their age 28, 29, 30, when they kind of cast off the illusions of their childhood, or rather just cement their identity as an adult and decide, what exactly they want to carry with them forward, to become a full-fledged human being, and not be relying on, say, the whim of parents and the whim of approval from external people, but to know what exactly generates your sense of identity. And so it's very interesting. That very much ties into what I've been experiencing personally over the last few weeks and months. Conflicts with parents and all these different things. And, what's interesting is I found myself almost talking to my past selves, almost like, wondering what my self as a kid would think of me now. And, it's interesting because they say in the return of Saturn, basically it's yourself now, age 28, resonating with your 21-year-old self, your 14-year-old self, and your 7-year-old self. And I found that to be a very interesting way of looking at the internal narrative that I was having. That really, it was like myself as a kid, myself as a teenager, myself as in college, all kind of talking to one another, and then talking to who I am now. And I feel like I've been the same person the whole time. I feel like I am one of the people who I allowed my youth to survive. I didn't kill off my inner child, so to speak, in order to survive in the Matrix, because I never gave a shit about the Matrix. In fact, I declared open war on the Matrix, and I decided that I would do whatever it took to maintain my sense of personal creativity, my sense of magical identity, my sense of, a secret existence, that sounds pretty scandalous, but, the point is that if you really accept what this world is trying to tell you through the Academy and the TV, what they are trying to tell you is that this is a dead universe, it's pointless, it's got no meaning other than just physical pleasure, and, basically that there is no universal truth, there's no universal value, it's all relative, okay? Nothing really matters at all. It's just about, basically, the highest virtue is tolerance, right? Because there's no universal ethics, there's no universal values. And so basically, this culture cheers on the death of the human spirit, right? That it wants you to believe that your life is essentially a figment of random chance, all right? That, they ask you to believe in one miracle, and the Big Bang, and then after that it's all random chance and it's all pointless, and basically there's no greater narrative, and in fact it's always been the same way, and it's all just been evolving slowly and statically, and there's no interesting narrative, and it's not really that much to talk about. We're just some backwater planet, and really it's almost like behind this whole narrative, again, is the will to death, basically that these people don't want to acknowledge, that there is a source of life, that life has meaning, that life has purpose. And even when you look at animals, you can see that they love life, they love what they're doing, and just watching some fucking cats play, is some of the most entertaining. You don't need television, just get a couple of cats from the Humane Society. But it's the same thing with cows or goats. These are entirely sentient beings, and life itself, if you really just meditate and watch even a snail, basically it is absolutely amazing. Every single living organism is amazing. It is a miracle. And if you really kind of just tune into it, you'll realize that basically, that this is the ultimate technology. Life is the ultimate technology, and not even in a Monsanto way. Life in its natural form is the ultimate perfect technology. And in our highest state of awareness, all that we really do is put ourselves in a state of harmony with that ultimate perfect technology. We consume the plants. We resonate with the plants. We, basically, and not even just the plants, but the minerals and, basically the mushrooms, right? And the sunlight itself, basically. And it's all just forms of energy, right? And it's just funny, man. Like, there's so many people who will call my conversation topics, like, I don't know, woo-woo or new age, and, basically these people who are like these atheists or these Luciferians, and, I don't know, they listen to too much heavy metal music, and now they think it's like their job to defend like Satan and like the satanic energy, and talk shit on anybody who actually resonates with a higher sort of spiritual purpose and sort of natural human ethics, because the soul that is corrupted, misery loves company, all right? And the soul that is corrupted is constantly seeking to justify its corruption by corrupting others. And the thing that infuriates demonic spirits more than anything is someone just like myself. Not a goody-goody two-shoes, but somebody who actually has been to the dark side, who has walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and has danced with the devil, so to speak, and still chooses to do good because it's simply in my interests to do good. I am increased as a human being when I see other people respond with gratitude to things that I do for them. And, it's not to say that this is all about altruism. Again, what I'm saying is that it is in my self-interest to be a good person, to follow a natural ethic, to follow natural law. Okay? And it's very interesting that we are now returning to this. Our generation is now returning to this, at this prophesied time, the apocalypse, when basically it was said that basically this was always known. The Mayans, the Maya knew it, everybody knew it. It was always this prophesied timeline that eventually the human race would get access to the truth again. And it would come in certain waves, but eventually there would come a critical mass, and the human species would see the truth. Of how the universe works, how their body works, how their society works, and they would perceive the true antagonists to the life energy that are operating on this planet. And that would lead to this ultimate conflict, which, basically they call Armageddon or whatever. And I'm not, a fundamental Christian, but, I believe that the texts of the Bible are very interesting when you look at them through a higher lens, an allegorical lens. Basically the god of the Bible is Saturn, basically, who at one time our planet was a paradise. The entire planet was bathed in warm, glowing plasma energy from Saturn. Egypt was green, right? We know that Egypt along the Nile was totally green. It was a paradise. And the climate of the planet used to be really different, and that people used to eat, basically fruit, basically, again, why the human diet is naturally a frugivore, basically just a fruit, essentially, and vegetables and seeds and nuts, is basically because the entire planet was bathed in energy. It was like a tropical environment. And when the climate shifted, all right, all of a sudden, there will always be more plant food than animal food in any given stable planetary environment. The only reason why people would have to eat meat is if the climate shifted and all of a sudden plants were not growing as much as they were before. But there would still be animals roaming around, basically. So I personally believe that humans adapted to eat meat as a consequence of a massive climate shift, that we were cast out of the garden, right? That God judged us, Saturn judged us, and all of a sudden the whole, garden, the whole universe, the whole world was thrown out of alignment. We were exiled from that paradise. The climate shifted. Now all of a sudden we got to work for our food. It's not just growing everywhere. We feel that we've been judged by this, this entity that we thought was taking care of us. And then we go on for hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands of years, taking it personally, thinking that this God hates us. And now we've got atheists running around on the internet just whining till the end of the earth about how God is so bad and evil, when really what they're arguing against is an allegorical translation of what was originally celestial, cosmic, physical events. And it was such a traumatic memory, and it's so foreign from what we know today. Again, we have the normalcy bias. This world is totally calm compared to what our ancestors probably experienced. And, who knows? The sun is going into a dormant period now. The climate is shifting. They're blaming it on us and carbon, but it's going to keep changing, and it's going to keep getting colder as well as hotter in certain places, but a general cold transition and a lot more cloud cover as cosmic rays come into the planet as the Earth's magnetic field weakens. Okay, right now the magnetic North Pole is moving faster and faster and faster. In fact, the North and South Poles are moving towards each other right now. They're moving towards a similar point, and it's somewhere in Indonesia. And it's just very interesting that we're undergoing these planetary changes geologically, magnetically, and the sun is undergoing these changes, and at the same time we're experiencing these turmoil, events in our culture, and almost the transition of worlds. And again, it feels like we're on the transition of something even bigger. But I guess that's my message for today, basically that we can take back the narrative when we just kind of stop taking things so personally, and just, basically interact with the information as it lays. And basically, the truth is always simpler than we're ready to accept. And that's kind of like the hardest part, is that, sometimes the simple explanation is actually the most wild and fantastic, but it's because it's just it's a little bit outside of our normal realm of day-to-day experience. But things are going to keep getting more interesting, and I just I just want to emphasize that you should have a good sense of humor about things, and not take things too personally. And whether it's religious leaders or political leaders, we are the author of the universe. I am the author of my experience. I have now lived one God year, well, almost beginning of one God year, and basically I know what it is that I'm supposed to be doing on this planet. I'm very comfortable with my mission. It's proceeding ever more wonderfully, and basically that mission is to bring paradise on this planet. We are children of paradise, and now it's our job to find out how to build paradise, so that we will actually be able to bring that paradise potentially to other planets. But that's for another video, and I hope you guys have a wonderful time, and may the Force be with you all.